Welcome to my YouTube channel Sushant Reddy. Every week, I present my life lessons as an entrepreneur in sales, human psychology, and wealth creation. For this episode, I refer to the ideas of Nassim Taleb from his book Black Swan and Fooled by Randomness, Annie Duke, the author of the book Thinking in Bets, and Howard Marks, the legendary investor and founder of Oaktree Capital. In the last episode, I started a discussion on ways to reduce the impact of luck in the very early stages of a company. We said that risk control is nothing but an act of managing skill and luck at various times in the lifetime of a company. I introduced 3 ways to reduce the impact of negative luck. First one was to rapidly increase our skills. Second is to reduce the exposure to misfortune. And third one is to be cognizant of biases and eliminate them. We said that when skill levels are low, we need to control the exposure to misfortune. I've been using the term exposure since the last episode without actually explaining what it really means. So let's start by understanding this term. Let's plot the impact of risk on y-axis. So lower down the axis, we have low impact, and as we go higher, we have a higher risk impact. Now, red line is an ideal curve that goes downwards. Anything that follows this line is a path we should consider as it actively reduces the impact of risk. There are 3 actions we can do that put us on this path. 1 is to avoid risk. Avoiding is to reduce the likelihood of coming face to face with negative luck. 2 is to blunt the risk. Blunting is to soften the destructive power of negative luck event. 3 is to eliminate the risk. Eliminating is to identify and remove the source of risk. Avoiding doesn't reduce risk, but reduces the probability of us being in a harm's way. Blunting is stage 2. The risk that can't be avoided is blunted to a degree that helps us to survive the event. Stage 3 is elimination, a powerful form of risk reduction. It attacks the source, and hence the impact on risk reduction is the highest with this method. Avoidance and blunting, I call them as passive forms of risk control. Elimination is an active form of risk control. Let's look at an example to intuitively understand these 3 methods. I lived on the Upper West Side of Manhattan, and the risk of mugging was always a real risk late into the night. To put in place a risk control strategy, I can do one of the 3 things. 1 is to avoid taking a route through deserted streets. 2 is to keep a $20 bill in my wallet. In case I end up in a mugging situation, I quickly take out my wallet and show the person that I'm giving him everything I have. This is a blunting strategy where you value life much more than what the opposite party does. 3 is to fight and actively defend yourself. This brings us to a question: how to decide which method of risk control to choose at which time? How do we know what the optimal strategy is? This can be addressed by discussing the circle of influence. There are a lot of random events happening in the universe on which we have absolutely no control. Each of us has a small circle called the circle of influence. Inside this circle, we control and influence the outcome of events. As we grow in life and accumulate resources, our circle of influence grows, but it still will be a small subset of the universe. Luck is what happens when events we don't influence or control impact the outcomes. Luck originates in the gray region. Skill originates within the red circle. Which form of risk control you adopt is dependent on how big your circle of influence is. Early on, when our influence is low, avoidance is the best strategy. As you build more influence, a combination of avoidance and blunting would be the optimal risk control strategy. Once influence becomes high, you can adopt a risk elimination strategy. For example, if I own a small e-commerce portal that is attracting a lot of customers, I avoid risk of Amazon by building a niche set of products with a strong value proposition that I can defend. On the other hand, Amazon can choose to eliminate my risk by either giving me a buyout offer or by poaching my key employees or suppliers. While I can only avoid risk, Amazon, with its massive resources, can eliminate risk. So when influence is low, avoid and blunt risk, and when influence is high, eliminate risk. Elimination needs a lot of resources, so grow to a stage and then start attacking risk at its source. Reducing exposure to risk effectively means adopting an avoid and blunt strategy. There are two components to this strategy. One is to reduce the likelihood of coming face to face with a negative luck event, and second is to reduce the intensity of that event whenever it happens. Here are the top 3 ways to cut down the exposure to risk. Number 1 is to minimize spend. Number 2 is to have a deep hibernation plan. Number 3 is to keep the business simple. Now we go back to the old grandma formula to cut needless spending. This is a risk avoidance strategy. Cutting spending doesn't reduce risk in the venture, but leaves us better prepared to face adverse situation. Greater the spend, greater is the dependence on external resources. Greater this dependence, greater is the exposure. And as exposure increases, fragility of the business also increases. One hard blow of bad luck and the foundation of business can collapse. For an early stage startup, effectiveness versus cost curve follows the power law. The least cost item that is also the most effective weapon for an early startup is the team of founders. Founders keep their compensation to a minimum and are highly motivated to deliver. Next come the early core team that needs to be hired to build the product or service. Next is the most important acquisition channel that works for the company. As Peter Thiel in his book 0 to 1 says, most startups have 70% of their business coming from one key acquisition channel. As we go down this curve, cost increases but the effectiveness continues to drop. This is where the minimum spending mantra comes into play. Realizing what the absolute core is and restricting spending only on that core is the best way to avoid risk exposure in the early years. Nature has a lot of lessons for us. One such lesson is deep hibernation. A deep hibernation plan is to use absolute minimum resources to keep the core business alive. Deep hibernation plan is the best blunting strategy because it helps us identify our absolute core, the thing that defines what we do, and just focus on sustaining that core. An ounce of extra energy or a dollar of extra capital above this minimum threshold is a wasted resource while you are in the deep hibernation mode. Deep hibernation mode is the best strategy to tackle unknown unknowns, risks that we don't know exist but can happen in the future. As you grow bigger, hibernation plan can allocate more and more resources for the rainy day. Keep the business simple and focus on the core. This master formula kills two birds in one shot. It is both an avoiding and a blunting strategy. Chasing simplicity helps us in improving skills while cutting down exposure simultaneously. It helps us channelize our focus and objectively measure our progress. A simple business with lesser number of moving parts can also implement a better hibernation plan faster. When you're starting to build a business, start with a skateboard instead of a car. Keeping things simple means that there are lesser things that can fail. Lesser things to fail automatically reduces the wrath of misfortune. So to summarize our key learnings of this episode, reduce exposure levels when the skill level is low early on in the company. Risk can be avoided, blunted, or eliminated. When influence is low, avoid and blunt risk. When influence is high, eliminate risk at its source. Spending brings dependency and dependency creates risk. Cutting expenses is the best risk avoidance strategy for early stage companies. Nature teaches us hibernation for tough times. Have a deep hibernation plan. It's the best risk blunting strategy to face unknown risks that can happen into the future. Keep business super simple. Simplicity is the ultimate risk control strategy because it improves focus and reduces the number of things that can fail. Thanks for watching. For weekly videos, you can subscribe to my channel or to my newsletter on sushantreddy.com. Until next time, stay safe and goodbye.